Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are here for more Albert Einstein opinions and ideas, ideas and opinions. I can't. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to read two pieces, and the first one is called Fascism and Science. A letter to Signor Rocco, Minister of Justice and Education under Mussolini, 1925 to 1932, published in Mein Weltbild, Amsterdam, Corrido Verlag. My dear sir, two of the most eminent and respected men of science in Italy have applied to me in their difficulties of conscience and requested me to write to you with the object of preventing, if possible, a cruel hardship with which men of learning are threatened in Italy. I refer to an oath of loyalty to the fascist system. The burden of my request is that you should please advise Signor Mussolini to spare the flower of Italy's intellect this humiliation. However, much of our political convictions may differ. I know that we agree on one basic point. We both admire the outstanding accomplishments of the European intellect and see in them our highest values. Those achievements are based on the freedom of thought and of teaching, on the principle that the desire for truth must take precedence over all other desires. It was this basis alone that enabled our civilization to take its rise in Greece and to celebrate its rebirth in Italy at the Renaissance. This, our most valuable possession, has been paid for by the martyr's blood of pure and great men, for whose sake Italy is still loved and revered today. I do not intend to argue with you about what inroads on human liberty may be justified by reasons of state, but the pursuit of scientific truth, detached from the practical interests of everyday life, ought to be treated as sacred by government as it is by the highest interest of all, that honest servants of truth should be left in peace. This is also undoubtedly in the interests of the Italian state and its prestige in the eyes of the world. So, yeah, he's basically telling them, look, you can't be anti-intellectual because we know much of the fascist states were against intellectualism. And they basically wrote to Einstein and says, we need you to speak up, on our behalf. And I just lost a bunch of pages I was at. Nope, too far ahead. Too far ahead. All right, there it is. Fascism and Science. But yeah, um, Two of the more respected and eminent scientists in Italy basically asked Einstein, says, please, we need you to speak on our behalves. So Einstein wrote to see, Signor Rocco, or Mr. Rocco, Minister of Justice and Education under Mussolini. And you can see a lot of similarities to today, too, because if the science doesn't work in certain people's favor, they like to go, it's fake. Science doesn't work the way you want it to work. It just works. Whether it finds out stuff that's bad for you, or your campaign, or your rule, that doesn't matter. Because science is science. It's just all in how we decide we want to look at it. But yeah. And the next one I'm going to read is called On Freedom. From Freedom, Its Meaning. Edited by Ruth Nanda Anshin in New York Harcourt, Brace and Company, 1940. Translated by James Gutman. I know that it is a hopeless undertaking to debate about fundamental value judgments. For instance, if someone approves as a go the extirpation of the human race from the earth, one cannot refute such a viewpoint on rational grounds. But if there is agreement on certain goals and values, one can argue rationally about the means by which these objectives may be obtained. Let us, then, indicate two goals which may well be agreed upon by nearly all who read these lines. 1. The instrumental goods which should serve to maintain the life and health of all human beings should be produced by the least possible labor of all. 2. The satisfaction of physical needs is indeed the indispensable precondition of a satisfactory existence, but in itself it is not enough. In order to be content, men must also have the possibility of developing their intellectual and artistic powers to whatever extent accords with their personal characteristics and abilities. Sorry, I think I was right the first time. And artistic powers to whatever extent accords with their personal characteristics and abilities. The first of these two goals requires the promotion of all knowledge relating to the laws of nature and the laws of social process. That is, the promotion of all scientific endeavor. For scientific endeavor is a natural whole, the parts of which mutually support the other in a way which, to be sure, no one can anticipate. However, the progress of science presupposes the possibility of unrestricted communication of all results and judgments, freedom of expression and instruction in all realms of intellectual endeavor. By freedom, I understand social conditions of such a kind that the expression of opinions and assertions about general and particular matters of knowledge will not involve dangers or serious disadvantages for him who expresses them. This freedom of communication is indispensable for the development and extension of scientific knowledge, a consideration of much practical import. In the first instance, it must be guaranteed by law, but laws alone cannot secure freedom of expression. In order to that every man may present his views without penalty, there must be a spirit of tolerance in the entire population. Such an ideal of external liberty can never be fully attained, but must be sought unremittingly if scientific thought and philosophical and creative thinking in general are to be advanced as far as possible. If the second goal, that is, the possibility of spiritual development of all individuals, is to be secured, a second kind of outward freedom is necessary. Man should not have to work for the achievement of the necessities of life to such an extent that he has neither time nor strength for personal activities. Without his second kind of outward liberty, freedom of expression is useless for him. Advances in technology would provide the possibility of this kind of freedom if the problem of a reasonable division of labor were solved. The development of science and of creative activities of the spirit in general requires still another kind of freedom, which may be characterized as inward freedom. It is this freedom of the spirit which consists in the independence of thought from the restrictions of authoritarian and social prejudices, as well as from unphilosophical routinizing and habit in general. This inward freedom is an infrequent gift of nature and a worthy objective for the individual. Yet the community can do much to further this achievement. 2. At least by not interfering with its development. Thus, schools may interfere with the development of inward freedom through authoritarian influences and through imposing on young people excessive spiritual burdens. On the other hand, schools may favor such freedom by encouraging independent thought. Only if outward and inner freedom are constantly and consciously pursued is there a possibility of spiritual development and perfection, and thus of improving man's outward and inner life. So, yeah. Einstein essentially saying there must be, to advance to advance thought and science, philosophy, we need a level of freedom. Um, we need a freedom of speech, which a lot of people like to cry, freedom of speech today, but then they'll attack another person if they say something they don't like. You know, right likes to cry, oh, cancel culture. Look at this horrible cancel culture. And then they try to use cancel culture themselves. So no one is not guilty of this. We need to accept freedom of speech from both sides. We need a freedom of time, was another one he mentioned, in a sort, that we mustn't be so consumed with everyday work to survive that we have no real time to advance our ability to think, to advance science and other possibilities. Unfortunately, even with the lessened work week from what it was, our society prevents us from really being able to have that time to think, to do stuff. And then he talks about an inner freedom, especially with schools. Because if it's one thing you learn in schools, it's levels or ways of teaching. Because not everybody learns the same, even though we often try to teach people in much the same ways. You might see some variation here or there, but often teachers try to teach through just one or two ways. When, if you follow um, the I forgot what they were called. I can't remember who it was. Piaget. It, basically, someone's ways of learning. Because they were like 7 or 8 ways of learning that they had encountered. That the mind takes in information differently. Some people do wonderfully with memorization and rote, um, you know, memorization that way. Uh, it works for them, but other people, they have to have it, uh, some example of it physically. Other people, because they're tactile. Other people, they're visual. They like to see things. That's why I wanted to be a history teacher at one time. One of the things you need is you can teach, from the book right on the board and stuff, but also if you have artifacts that you can bring in, cannonballs, let's say, or shot, or a copy of a document that's important in history, bring them in, let them see that. Those who learn through seeing and touching and everything. And then you've got the visual, play movie clips or short films or whatever that deal with the history of things. You need to incorporate different ways of teaching to really help everyone. And then he also says that unfortunately schools, they need to appreciate independent thought, because too often they try to drown out uh, dissident thoughts. Which there is a careful line you have to tread when teaching like that. But yeah, that's going to be it for now. As always, Educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. But as always, I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.